Hello and welcome everyone to the IDC European FutureScape 2023. Thank you for joining us today. We are very much looking forward to taking you through the next hour, focused on slicing through the storms of disruptions in the era of digital business. We are going to talk you through the top predictions that the team has put together and give you guidance how to navigate 2023 as well as the years beyond. Now, we're going to be highlighting three key areas. One, clearly the storms and what's going on there. I will put some context around that. But then also understanding what needs to be done in this digital first world in terms of both maintaining your stance, but also accelerating through into the future. And last but certainly not least, what does it take to participate in the digital decade and why do we think it is here right now? Now, in the next hour, you'll see some of the analysts that have been working as part of teams to create the predictions. And we've had over 50 analysts across Europe participating and contributing and building the predictions that we are going to present to you in the next hour. Now, how can you help us and engage with us? Please join via Twitter or LinkedIn, but also make sure that you join us on the platform. Give us your thoughts, your opinions, your feedback. Tell us what your favorite predictions are. And perhaps there are also some that you think are not going to be quite so important or impactful, or perhaps you just disagree with them. Let us know. Get engaged with everyone at IDC and tell us your opinion. Now, we always start at this point with a view to the predictions that we put together last year. As you can see, we feel that we did fairly well again with a lot of the predictions that we put together showing green. So we think they're on track. And in fact, some are for this year as well. And we think, yeah, we absolutely hit the mark. We also have some that are yellow. And that's mainly to do with timing. And then also one red one. Now, what we focused on last year were things like digital sovereignty. And we feel we started covering this topic very early. The same around sustainability. We had a practice in that area for a number of years now. So we captured some of those areas. If you feel some of the predictions that you will see now in this session don't answer all of your questions, maybe go back to those predictions as well and take a look at how they might be relevant to you even now, because we think that those predictions we use to build the predictions for the next few years. Now, one prediction we didn't perhaps do so well on, but that's more of a timing thing again. So we think that particularly as regards the startup ecosystems, we went in with a higher percentage, about 70%. Now we thinking it's going to be about 28% in 2023 that's going to be realized. So not far off the mark, but still a little bit of work in progress. So before we move into the context and the first predictions, let me just start off by giving you one really important message. Coming out of COVID-19, the milestones that we've passed in terms of digital maturity are tremendous. And that affected all areas of society, of business, of operation, of organizations and institutions, and us as consumers as well. The end of this was that in terms of digital acceleration, we are at a very different level than we were 3 years ago. So this is one of the long-lasting outcomes that we've seen. Now, we also talked about the wins last year. Some of you might remember that. The issue is now that we feel that perhaps has become even more complex. And I'm going to turn to Andrea now to let him talk through how we see this developing now and how this is impacting our thinking going forward. So with that, over to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Tom, and hello, everybody, and great to be here. And you're right, so fast-moving time, and actually, as you see, I think you all remember this COVID curve we've been looking at in the past couple of years, from that the pandemic hit to the industry reset, and finally then to that recovery, kind of the other scenario. We also learned quite quickly how that curve was not ending there, actually, but going ahead across multiple waves, and also quite suddenly, we get very familiar with a multitude of other external forces impacting both business and digital plan across European organizations. Some of those with a very swinging impact, like think about supply chain, bottleneck, for example. Other definitely with a negative connotation, like the war, for example. And also other bringing some breadth to the scenario, like the European Recovery and Resiliency Government stimulus. Other with still a very unknown destiny and impact. So take, for example, the energy shortage that could be next. So really, the litany of these external forces is really growing and transforming what we call the storms of disruptions, where it's actually really the interference and not temporary and fracturing effect of all these forces that really determines the final organizational impact.
Many thanks, Andrea, for putting some context around this. I think that's very clear. But can you talk a little bit around how this is affecting the industries at a very high level?
Absolutely, and the industry is always an interesting lens, because actually when we look at industries, there are different impacts across industries. So like if you look at this chart, you see like retail, manufacturing, really to the upper part of the chart, they are really in the front line of exposure and impact to this kind of a storm of disruption. And there are other, like that are traditionally by nature more resilient industry, like telco media. Even if we have to say that when we look at this, in particular now, the industry layer is not enough. Actually, we need to go deeper. We need to go to the sub-industry level first. So think, for example, take transportation, very fragmented market. And we saw in the past 2 years, really the opposite impact. For example, if you look at aviation company, where we really need to shut down in the past 2 years, or other, like if you take the logistic and delivery subsector in transportation, actually it's saw in the market exploding, driven by this remote e-commerce boom. But the reality is really that it's a really company-specific story, even within the same sub-industry, where digital maturity of each company is really a precious indicator of company resilience and storm-proof solidity. And this is what we see here has also been defined by different authors. Also, you see Financial Times definition here as a poly-crisis. And this is a scenario we need to get used to. It's really a scenario where storms are not going to be the exception anymore, actually, but the rule, where priorities will be reshuffled completely, and where it's really crucial for all of us to keep the eyes on the compass without being scared by the wave ahead. So it's clear, as you can see that in the last quote on the right there, that the post-pandemic optimism is really fading away, with some business pessimism mounting.
So, Andrea, thanks for that. We come to the big question now, though. Are we expecting a recession, and what impact would that have?
Yeah, an easy question, Tom, on the recession scenario. Actually, the risk, what we are seeing is that actually what we're seeing also learning from like the consensus here, the risk really of a recession in Europe before the end of the year is receding. And this is thanks to government stimulus, to lower gas prices that we have seen in the past few weeks. Also supply chain challenges that have been solved in the majority of markets. There are still some exceptions, all overall fine. And also an averted energy shortage crisis, thanks to the mild autumn and also stock reach level. So there has been a downturn, for sure, with respect to the early 2022, with respect to this year's expectation. But this will be much more moderate than previously feared. Now, however, the economical pessimism is really also after the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, is now rapidly shifting to the next year, with that kind of gloomy scenario expectation really for the second half of next year, where inflation impact on consumer spending will be much more evident, and also where will be much more difficult also for European to refill the energy shortage capacity in preparation for next winter. So this is what really leading to this kind of mild recession expectation for the year ahead. So that's the economical expert view. But actually, we would like also to hear from you. So actually, let us launch a quick poll now where we would like to ask you actually, what do you think? So there will be a recession next year in Europe. What are your expectations? So hopefully in front of you on the screen, you see the different options. So you are expecting really this to be a more kind of, again, mild recession, or more, it will be more moderate or a severe, or maybe you're thinking, you know what, next year will be fine, or if not, maybe amazing. So that's the kind of scenario. So I see the first result coming in, and so very interesting one. So let's wait a couple of seconds to get some answer. Hopefully you all can see the options, so you have it in front of you, and you can click on what you think is the right option. So Tom, I'm not sure if you see the result. Actually, there are some very interesting one. Actually, the majority of the scenario is quite pessimistic, because actually I see that the majority are going really into this moderate recession scenario, severe one. So I would say really almost 80% in total are expecting this moderate or severe recession scenario. I also noticed that there is a few actually respondents say it will be tough, but not really a recession. So very interesting. But I think still the majority really going toward that moderate, severe recession scenario.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for sharing the poll results with us. And obviously, thank you everyone who responded to the poll. Now, what you can see here now is that your responses map very closely to our general surveys that we've had out in the market and the most recent responses as well, looking at a moderate in the main, to some saying it might be severe. I think one of the things that we need to consider is that timing plays a key role in this. So we're seeing a shift already with, and Andrea alluded to this, some of the energy crisis perhaps being not quite as severe this winter, but there are certain expectations for next year. So there is a fluidity here as well in terms of the storms that needs to be considered and how to respond to those. Fact of the matter is that we're seeing these impacts accelerate and increase over time, and how they are interlinked causes some major storms that we are all facing and that need to be navigated. Now, the question I'm sure you're all asking yourself is, okay, so that's great, we understand that, but what is the impact on IT spending going forward? And for that, I would like to go to Frankfurt, to Giorgio. Giorgio, can we hear a little bit more context from your side around what we're expecting in terms of IT spending going forward?
Thank you so much, Tom, and good afternoon, everyone, from my side too. Now, so as Andrea mentioned, there is a lot of discussion now about recession out there. The consensus forecast right now is that the European GDP will be more or less flat next year. This is the red line you see here. But if there is one thing we've learned in the past 2 years is that you have to be careful. You have to keep watching, keep looking, because things can change very, very quickly. You also need to be very careful in how you translate the GDP impact into IT spending. Our expectation for next year is that there will be a further cooling down of growth in the IT spending of European players, and we will land around 5% growth for the region across all technologies next year. Now, this is in constant currency, and whilst not a spectacular performance, it is also not doom and gloom. It is more or less in line with the average growth we've seen in the past decade. So negative drivers around the IT spend will be consumer-facing technologies. So things like devices, peripherals, whereas the as-a-service side will see a more resilient performance. Things like software, cloud, and even IT services will perform more or less similarly to what we've seen in the past 12 months. Also, you have to bear in mind that in those numbers is Russia. Russia has seen a pretty dramatic supply-driven collapse of the market in the past 12 months. And that is almost borne out already. So next year, things will be kind of stabilizing a little bit. Now, what should you look at as IT buyer or as an IT supplier as you look at this space? We think there are three major swing factors that you should really focus on. The first one is whether B2B spending will remain resilient. Currently, we bake in our forecast a contraction on the consumer side, but a slower but fairly resilient growth on the business side of things. Whether that will remain the case, it's an open question right now. The second key factor is around exchange rates. We've seen in the past 12 months a differential of almost 10 points between the amount of money that was spent locally in local currency on the European streets, so to say, versus what IT suppliers saw in dollar terms in their earning sheets. And so, whilst it's impossible to forecast next year's exchange rate, certainly that's a factor that will play a role. And then finally, suppliers will also define some of that depending on their strategies. They might continue to pass on some of the additional costs to buyers, or in some cases, they might decide to bear some of the costs, sacrifice some margins to win market share or to prop up demand. And so these are all kind of very dynamic elements to consider. So all in all, Tom, average growth expected for next year, about a bit slower than the past 2 years, and a lot of factors to ponder and wait for vendors as well as buyers. So Tom, back to you.
Thank you, Giorgio, for sharing the expectations with us, both in terms of GDP and IT spending. I think what's quite clear is that we continue to see IT spending accelerating and growing at a larger pace than we see the expectations around GDP. And from our perspective, this is clearly associated with the need for investment to build resilience and to make sure that you're keeping pace with the market and that you're focusing on initiatives that will help you on your digital journey. That's, again, very individual for every organization, company, and country, for that matter. Now, when you think about resilience, you're probably thinking mostly around costs, cost efficiencies, but also risk mitigation that play a major role. Now, underpinning a lot of the architectures that we see nowadays is clearly the topic of cloud. And cloud has become such a large share that this is a good starting place to understand what does this mean in terms of resiliency and how can I really leverage that. To talk you through that, very pleased to have Ashana with us here today. So let's go over to Ashana.
Yes, Tom, hi. You are absolutely right. With organizations feeling the impact of all these storms of disruptions that we have highlighted so far, there is an increased scrutiny on IT budget spends and the business value that the IT spend delivers. And a lot of that is connected to cloud, because cloud is now such a foundational technology for organizations in their digital transformation journeys, because companies have highlighted benefits like increased productivity, better collaboration, better access to innovation accelerators. So cloud is very much fundamental of that IT spend. And what our multi-cloud survey shows is the scale of not just cloud spend, but also what organizations think they're wasting in the cloud, right? So if you look at this, 51% of European organizations are wasting between 10 and 50% of their total cloud costs, and they're categorizing it as waste. And if you look at another 13%, they have no idea of how much of their total cloud spend is actually waste. And that's a big problem, right? If you don't know what your spend is, you're not going to be able to optimize it or monitor it. So that's pretty much the starting point to get that visibility into your cloud spend, which then you can absolutely optimize. And when you look at the scale of cloud waste, it's not always just idle resources, right? There are multiple dimensions to how you can optimize in the cloud, because some organizations don't right scale very well in the cloud. They don't do better capacity planning or forecasting. So managing costs in the cloud as well as managing costs off the cloud is very, very important. And that's why we predict that in 2023, 40% of European organizations will launch a dedicated FinOps practice to increase their IT budget transparency and efficiency. And this will free up 15% of their cloud spending, which they can reinvest in innovation. And when we think about cloud spend in tens of millions, 15% is a huge amount that organizations can then reuse in accelerating their innovation. So what is FinOps, right? It's very much a collaborative culture. It's a discipline, and it's a strategy to bring in that financial excellence in your IT spend. It's not about cutting costs. It's about optimizing your cloud spend, because that's where you get maximum benefits, because you can give your developers and lines of businesses all the features and capabilities that they need to innovate, whilst at the same time making sure that your waste of cloud spend is minimal by taking a lot of steps. So there are three different phases of FinOps in that life cycle. And it starts with inform phase, where you see a lot of transparency and monitoring and just understanding the patterns of your cloud spend. And then you can take action to optimize that. And then you also automate it so that you operate it in a very automated fashion and have those policy engines and understand which business unit spends what and attach that to their P&Ls. And, in the past, we have seen IT and business come together for digital transformation. When DevOps became a thing, you had IT developers and business come together. And we are now entering this era of FinOps, where you also see the financial stakeholders come and have a huge say. So this group of 4 key stakeholders coming together as part of that cloud center of excellence are the ones who are driving FinOps strategies for a lot of organizations. And we will see a lot of that having a huge impact in cost optimization. I mean, when you look at the cloud vendors themselves, in their annual results, they all have highlighted the value of cloud consolidation and optimization. So it's going to be a very important priority for a lot of C-suites.
So after the short interlude, we have resilience. This is about withstanding the storms and preparing you for the onslaught at what's being thrown at you. But we also need to very much focus on the acceleration part and balancing that very clearly, focus on innovation, but also revenue growth. But whether your focus is on one area or the other, so resilience or acceleration, or both, it needs to be underpinned by trust. So it's very great to have Julia here with me today. And hi Julia, and you're going to put this into a little bit more context, why this is critical for organizations.
Exactly. So indeed, in this poly-crisis macroeconomic scenario that we are experimenting, cost containment is just part of the story. So interestingly, the most important business outcome for technology investments is revenue growth, so revenue generation. So there is urgency actually for European organizations to work as a digital business. Which means having technology and business priorities really intertwined, so defining new business model, organization model, and operating model. And the engine that is underpinning this digital business is the technology architecture, so what we call the digital business platform. What we are expecting on that is that by 2024, European organizations that have developed a trusted digital business platform will be more than twice as likely to achieve double-digit revenue growth. So double-digit growth driven by their ability to better thrive in a turbulent time, to unlock more use cases, 25% more, and also their greater ability to diversify their business model.
So it's always interesting also to get an example, and you brought one along.
Yeah, exactly. We like to make things practical. So that example is from Sainsbury's, so the UK retailer. What they have done is that they have transformed their platform following actually a cloud-first strategy. And a key driver for that was actually the need to better align their technology architecture with the business mission and values. And so, as you see, what are the business outcomes that they would like to unlock? It's all about time to market, greater agility to respond to emerging business scenarios, and also, as we were mentioning, creating new revenue streams. Savings are part of the story, but actually to be reinvested for acceleration and for innovation.
So from an architectural perspective then, can you give us a view of the key elements to make this a reality?
Yeah. So we didn't actually define what this digital platform is. So that was actually an IDC analyst task force behind this framework, and we defined that as a multi-layered enterprise-wide technology architecture. So integrating really different systems and applications to enable use cases for resilience and acceleration. So back to the two sides of the coin. There are actually 12 foundational components that are really the gears behind this mechanism, this engine, and the color coding here actually refer to their level of prioritization for European enterprises over the next 12 months. So you really see things such as data systems, security, and multi-cloud being top of the list in terms of investments for the next year. But as I was mentioning, this is actually just the first layer. So this is what we call the foundational IT that needs to be designed also following some principles like being product-led, being modular, trusted, and intelligent. And on the top of that, there are actually two additional layers that are really software-driven, applications-driven. So the first one is technology-enabled use cases to build resilience. So think about contingency planning for the supply chain or customer churn analysis. And then on the top of that, so the most external layer, this is actually related to technology-enabled use cases to accelerate and innovate the business model. So think about ecosystem, data monetization, or also intelligent M&A modeling. So actually, back to the need of driving new revenue streams, you can really see from this framework how use cases are pivotal for that. And I guess one of the key reasons is also related to who is actually driving these investments today.
Yeah, for sure, because there are two elements, I think, that we already heard about. So one, the storms that we're all facing, then the impact on IT spending. We heard from Andrea and Giorgio there as well. And then we obviously asked as well in terms of, the spending scenario. You gave us your view in terms of some of the impact that you might see from a recession here online just now. But what we see is a very clear polarization at this particular point between, if you want, the CIO community and the IT community, as well as the C-suite line of business personas and their expectations. And what's really interesting is that when you look at it from a line of business perspective, from a C-suite perspective, technology is very much seen as an enabler for the use cases to grow and thrive going forward, but also obviously for resiliency. So this goes way beyond the foundational IT layer into the other two layers that you described as well. So that's great. So now we have a view of how this potentially works in terms of the architecture. Shall we go out with a poll?
Yeah, let's go with the poll.
The poll is, so if you please have a look, you should see a pop-up now there as well. So what are the priorities that you have for 2023?
You have some options there?
Yeah, there's some options there. So you should see this popping up. Let us know what you see, and we'll obviously comment on that in a second. Ideally, I can see the results coming in slowly but surely. Please click very quickly. Help us along here as well, and we'll make sure that we give you some feedback in a second. Again, I think it's fair to say that in the discussions that we had, and we'll refer to that in a moment, we've seen a mix clearly, but there are some priorities that have really emerged, and it'll be interesting to see whether this is actually reflected now in terms of response from the audience as well. So we have a result. This feels a little bit like the Eurovision Song Contest. It's very tight at this particular point. So let's go with 1, 2, 3. So Julia, do you want to, I mean, you can see the results here now as well. Do you want to give us a comment?
Pretty much aligned with what we will be sharing in a minute. So cybersecurity first, second customers, and then third cost and efficiency. So yes, these are the three that are winning our contest. Let's share maybe also what our digital leaders have been telling us in the past couple of weeks. So we actually asked our wonderful digital advisory board what were their predictions, their priorities for the next year, for 2023. And there was actually a good mix between resilience and acceleration. So you can see some of those more focused on responding to some challenges like the talent shortages, focusing on customers as well, particularly leveraging the power of data, but also others being a little bit more futuristic and projected into the future, like with the metaverse trends or tokenization trends. Is it more or less aligned with what we are seeing from our survey?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it very much maps to what we've seen overall. It also maps to the recent CIO summit that we had, which is about a month, 6 weeks ago now as well. Similar set of priorities, very much in the forefront. And again, you see it from the survey here again as well. What's interesting is that these map very clearly to the pillars that you mentioned as well. So the operating model, the business model, and the organizational model. And we'll get through all of those in a second and dive a little bit deeper. So thanks very much, Julia, for keying this up as well. And what we'll do now is, as we deep dive, we are going to start focusing, we're going to start with a focus on the operating model. And for that, we're going to go across to Lorenzo, who's going to take us to the first prediction related to the digital business pillars. Thank you, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Tom. So we see that today's escalating energy and raw material costs, regulatory requirements, and customer demands are finally bringing sustainability to the forefront. Finally, we are really witnessing a sort of a chain reaction where all these factors are compounding on each other to generate new types of business value. And indeed, today, for the first time ever, we can see that business value and environmental excellence are not going against each other, but actually can be maximized simultaneously, hand in hand. In other words, the same technologies that we're using to improve our businesses can be used to minimize environmental impact as well. So, for example, reducing material and energy consumption across operations has for sure a very strong operational value, but also an environmental value. And on the right-hand side, we can see an example on the ground. So Renault recently unveiled their industrial vision, and is based on 3 pillars. One is operational data collection. So they claim that more than 70% of the industrial equipment is now connected. The second element is a data platform. So they really developed internally, that's quite remarkable for a manufacturing company, their industrial data management platform that really is used to collect and manage the data at a large scale. And they use the data for energy management as well. So they're committed to becoming a net zero carbon by 2030, and for all the manufacturing sites in Europe. And the idea is that to capture and collect the energy management at the most granular level in the factory operations. And so we've seen that this is really important for companies, and sustainability is critical to operational transformation because it gives organizations a strong push to look better at their operational data, improve their ability to collect, analyze, and share operational data in detail. And with that, I'm going to move to the prediction now, which states that by 2026, all new entries in the top 500 European organizations will have implemented a sort of a CO2 of goods sold, tracking across all their operations, making these transformation initiatives for their physical operations. So with that, I'm going to hand over back to Tom.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I think it's absolutely super interesting and the sign of the times, extremely relevant at this point to see the connection between the operating model and sustainability. I guess one of the things that we still need to have an answer for, and I'm joined here by Erica, who will take us through that part of the thinking at the moment, because to enable this level of investment as well, to then get to the next level, we need to focus on the business model and make sure that there's obviously a return in play as well. So that's the second pillar of what we're looking at. So Erica, can you take us through the thinking there?
Sure, and it's all about delivering effective value. And what we discovered is that from the recent European Industry Acceleration Survey is that by 2024, 43% of digital revenues will come from digital products, services, and experiences. And this is effectively, and a sensible proportion of that is also coming from the monetization of digital assets. And with digital assets, we do not just intend these the blockchain-based NFT and tokenization, but we encapsulate a broader spectrum of assets, of digital assets, such as data, APIs, IPs, software, and virtual objects too. And these are going to deliver a larger value to the economy. And this is going not to be just a trend for the future, because we're already seeing this happening quite a lot. Like in the example from Ocado Technology, that is the tech company related to the British retailer group that is providing customers with Ocado Smart Platform, so an end-to-end and cloud-based platform to automate and fasten up the process of pick, pack, and delivery of groceries. Quite an interesting one too. And in fact, looking also at what the customers effectively are saying, so effectively taking the words for Americo Ribeiro, the CEO of Alcampo, so one of the biggest Spanish retail companies, he says that effectively the deployment of Ocado Smart Platform was a massive contribution to the digital commerce for the company, but also was the cornerstone for their sustainable value delivery, and also to increase and continuously grow and innovate. And critical, the monetization of assets is critical for the economy, and that's why we predict that by 2024, European enterprises will have accelerated effectively the monetization of their own and third-party digital assets via an ecosystem of partners, creating a value of around 1.5 trillion euro of gross value added from this new digital enabled business model. And in this context, effectively, the ecosystem of partners play a fundamental role in allowing organizations to effectively create value from the monetization of assets, both from a perspective of enhancing, for instance, data that can be monetized, but also to deliver platform and marketplaces where those assets can be effectively monetized, such as business-to-business platform, but also, for instance, industrial marketplaces.
So thank you, Erica, for taking us through that. I mean, 1.5 trillion is a big number. It's a very big number. However, I guess we've got to see this in the context of the fact that already for this year, we predicted that the revenue actually from digital services products is crossing over with the traditional business models. So we're clearly on this path already, but this is going to accelerate even more.
Even more in the future, exactly.
Okay. Now, thank you very much for that. We are going to turn to the third pillar now, because what's going to happen is if we want to go down that path, that's great. So we're building resiliency, we're building acceleration, and we've taken you through the operating model, and we've taken you through a business model. We need to look at the organizational model. So everyone out there is very acutely aware, I'm sure, of what we've been facing, certainly in recent times. It's really become a major challenge and concern in terms of how do we manage attracting, retaining, and growing the right skills and competencies that we have. Now, in terms of how we think about that part, the organizational part, and the digital business, I'd like to hand over to Martin and talk us through that. Martin, are you there?
And yes, this prediction comes from a slightly different angle. It starts with a question, do you have the right skills and experience in your organization to meet your business goals? And yes, 80% of you say that you're unable to in getting the right skills at the right time. There is a significant gap between demand and supply of critical IT and technology skills in Europe, and that will remain for the foreseeable future. The recession will help in that it will provide additional people coming out of work, but that is only marginally. The digitalization of our processes and our business, it simply has too much strength and creates a demand that we're simply not able to fill in Europe. Your awareness of this is high, but the remedy and the maturity is much more difficult. It's undisputed that it hits most of our business KPIs, be it revenue generation, cost efficiency, time to customer, product development, innovation. On average, your larger digitalization projects and programs are delayed with 8.1 months. Significant. So, what will this lead to? Well, safe to say, the war for talent will increase. Attrition will increase. People will look for greener grass on the other side of the fence. But the wiser of you are already building a new strategy for skills sourcing. The wiser of you have already realized the problem and the challenge and the opportunity. Business leaders will demand of program managers and project managers to verify that relevant skills are provided for. And this will come out on higher priority in the next period than the traditional criteria for investment. Program managers will in turn demand of the organization to ensure that skills supply is resilient over time. Training and reskilling will become standard tools in this strategy, as well as broadening the talent pool. As we're all fishing the same pond, we have to broaden the talent pool. We have to broaden where we're looking, both in terms of geography, in terms of gender, in terms of culture. The final message is that there's a strategy to be built here. And there's an opportunity for those of you that are able to build a strategy that fits your organization. Doing nothing will not be an option. With that, I hand over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Martin, for joining us today from Stockholm and talking to us about, I think, what's going to be one of the most talked about predictions again, because it's become such a hot topic as of recent times. Now, you see this nice young gentleman standing next to me, who I will get to in just 1 second, but maybe just to tee this up, Duncan, there are some critical elements when we think about the digital business, from the platform, then obviously the 3 key pillars, the operating model, organizational model, and the business model as well. We think that the greater digital maturity that we've seen, we talked about this at the beginning, and the need to focus on resilience, on the one hand to navigate the storms, but then also focus on acceleration to drive revenue growth, will lead us to the digital decade. So Duncan, what does that mean?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Well, you're right. I mean, I think there are 3 dimensions that will get us to the digital decade. There are consumers, organizations of all sorts, and also general society. So let's have a look at these 3 areas in turn. So let's start with consumers, and Gala is standing by, we hope, to take us through the impact of consumers. Gala, over to you.
Thank you, Duncan. This year, we would like to draw special focus onto consumers, as they account for 2/3 of the global economic activity. Technology plays a key role in every aspect of the consumer's life, and over the coming years, they will become even more important. Now, we have all noticed that ever since the start of the pandemic, personal and workspaces have become more interconnected. And work tech is being used for personal activities, and personal tech is being used for work occasionally, also sometimes because consumer electronics may be more advanced or powerful than what enterprises can provide for their consumers. On another level, as digital spaces collide, this gives rise to shoppertainment, or the convergence of e-commerce and digital experiences on various social engagement platforms to further drive purchasing behavior. Brands are now further looking how to augment these experiences through extended reality. Unfortunately, in the past, vendors have struggled to develop AR and VR solutions that were widely accepted by the consumer market. However, we expect that this will change very soon, as we see the race for developing AR and VR services, hardware and software accelerating. Now, to this point, IDC predicts that by 2026, 60% of all European consumer internet bandwidth will be taken up by extended reality, as the amount of consumer use cases reaches mainstream volumes, driving $12.5 billion in funding. Now we see that extended reality will create opportunities across all consumer areas of engagement. For example, this year we have seen brands successfully launching digital shopping experience spaces, such as Nike, with their Nike Land, which is digital immersive sports space on the gaming platform Roblox. At the moment, metaverse e-commerce is a very new concept. However, the Nike Land store has already had over 21 billion visitors this year alone, and we expect that more and more brands will soon join this trend. Another strong opportunity lies in digital immersive music events. A recent one was Ozfest, which was the biggest such event held to date, with performances by Ozzy Osbourne, Motorhead, and Megadeth. Furthermore, we see the increased use of NFT gaming, which will become more and more established. And it will soon also be moving into the extended reality space, driving a lot of consumer spend in this area. Thank you, and back to you, Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Scala. So let's go straight over to Stephanie to look at the organizational aspect of Digital Decade.
Thank you very much, Duncan. And for enterprises, one area that from our perspective is a super exciting one looking in the future is how organizations will continue to adopt digital twins. And in this context, IDC predicts that by 2026, 55% of large European organizations will have deployed digital twins as a key step in creating the enterprise metaverse, driving 25% of digital transformation spending. So for us, the metaverse is not something very far away. Actually, we see quite a lot of examples of how large European enterprises are deploying digital twins as key step in creating the enterprise metaverse. So, for example, in the manufacturing industry, we see initiatives related to enabling the industrial metaverse, which can be a digital twin of a plant or an assembly line, and where, for example, the operator of a machine can immerse himself virtually into this digital twin and solve issues with the machine by discussing them with a remote service and maintenance engineer, thereby solving issues much faster than before. And digital twin-inspired scenarios are now rapidly expanding into other industries. So take, for example, the government or healthcare segment. So digital twins of parts of a city infrastructure can enable cities or governments or governmental institutions to make faster and more informed decisions about urban planning and logistics. Or they can use simulations to develop or optimize disaster risk management plans. So this is already happening today. And cities that will utilize technological innovations such as digital twins can potentially deliver quite some impact in terms of quality of life, sustainability, and prosperity. And when we look at healthcare, a digital twin of a body can enable a surgeon to practice as many times as needed before laying hands on real patients. And a digital twin can even be created for each patient's body, also considering its medical history. And this can enable precise testing of treatments, leading to better medical decisions again and minimizing potential harm. So back to you, Duncan.
Thanks, Stephanie. Super interesting aspect there. So before we go to the society dimension, let's talk about trust. So we think that trust underpins everything, but trust is complicated. There are many dimensions and facets to trust. We've mentioned several already today. We've mentioned security, privacy, sustainability has come up. Digital sovereignty, Tom mentioned right at the beginning, comes up in almost every discussion, particularly around cloud that we have. But one thing that seems to be gaining in importance is this idea of regulation, policy, compliance. So let's go over to Max to look at the societal impact and particularly the impact of regulation.
Thank you, Duncan. And yeah, trust is definitely becoming the currency of the new era of the digital economy. And if you look at it from a policy-making perspective, the legislators across Europe, with the pandemic, with the current global volatility, and the realization that non-EU headquarter technology companies are actually controlling a good share of the value add generated in this region, the desire to give Europe the ability to self-determine their digital destiny by creating a European trust framework is very much on top of the political agenda. And looking at it from a vision and strategic outcome point of view, the European Digital Compass sets the targets, right? Sets the vision, sets the aspirations for the next decade on what the policymakers want to achieve through this trust framework. And that target is to empower businesses and people in a human-centered, sustainable, and more prosperous digital future. That's what the vision statement of the Digital Compass says. But in terms of practical steps, both the EU institutions and the legislators of member states are executing on that goal by implementing a body of regulations, policies, funding, promoting standards that can foster leading-edge research and innovation, such as through the Horizon funding, that can help economic recovery through digital, through the 20% of Next Gen EU program that will go to digital, and establishing European terms for researching, developing, buying, using, and selling technology in a trusted manner according to principles that look at digital sovereignty, cybersecurity, resiliency, digital inclusion, ethical use of AI. So achieving these EU-wide agreements, we expect will have a tangible impact in terms of the digital economy itself, right? It will enable the buyers and sellers of technology to realize the benefits of these new legal provisions, adopting them at scale, and bringing the level of trust in the digital economy to a new level, making technology investments more successful. In particular, we expect that by 2027, the success in reaching agreement on EU legal provision fostering the digital decade will increase trust and will avoid over 135 billion of wasted investment in digital projects that would otherwise have been stopped or not even started altogether because of lack of these European terms. So a really significant impact on society, which I think caps off the story that we're trying to tell very nicely. Isn't that the case, Tom?
Max, absolutely. Thanks for joining us today from Milan. And we had Stephanie from Munich and Gala next door. So thank you all. And Duncan, thanks for leading us through that. You're not off the hook yet. So if you stay a second, that would be wonderful. Because one thing is, I think, quite key. It's as we take you through the different areas on the path to the digital decade and the longer term predictions, they give you a flavor of the things to come. But it also, really is in the context of that acceleration and resilience and trust that spans throughout all of these areas. That is really extremely key to keep in mind. Just on the last prediction that Max highlighted, one of the things I would say is this is critical when we talk about the competitiveness in Europe going forward. So all of these elements need to come together at some level. So when we look at the predictions that we presented here over the last hour or so, all of these relate to the navigation of this time, the storms, but then also making sure that on that digital business path to the digital decade, we build that resiliency, but also accelerate throughout to drive the growth. Now, each of these predictions you can actually turn around, which I think is fascinating, but it depends on every individual journey. And I think Andrea mentioned that right at the beginning. So if you think back to Ashana's predictions around FinOps, if you can save money, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to work with the C-suite? And what is the C-suite direction to say, we are going to reinvest this money for acceleration, or are we going to park it, or in fact, build more resilience? So all of these are coming together, and hopefully they've given you a good view of how we see the future, what happens in the near term, but also going forward. Now, before we leave everyone out here, we would like to leave you with some recommendations. So, Duncan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Cheers. Well, I think there are three key things that we should pick up from what we've covered in the last hour or so. The first is this idea of flexible finance. So really creating a sense of adaptability depending on the economic circumstances and also customer requirements and demands. So let's keep finance flexible, and remember that customers will remember that flexibility. Yeah. Customers have a long memory sometimes, so let's focus on keeping options open. Second thing is that technology and business are essentially the same thing. We talk a lot about business being technology companies and so on, but if you're investing in technology, you're also investing in the business, so that should be the case. So the alignment of technology and business is absolutely fundamental and critical. Really, let's not lose sight of that. And there's this last thing of trust. So remembering that trust is complicated, but if you get it right, it really can be a differentiator in the market. So focus on all aspects of trust to differentiate yourself against competitors.
Great. Thank you, Duncan. I think this is hopefully really helpful for everyone out there. Now, let me just move to the Q&A. But before we go there, could I ask everyone to look at the feedback option that you have? Let us know what you like. Let us know which predictions you think are most relevant for you. What is critical as we go into 2023 and beyond. Now, I can see we're nearly out of time, but we do have lots of questions, and we should maybe just get to a couple. One of the ones I actually picked up from running order was around SMBs. We didn't cover SMBs per se, but let's just be sure to say we think that a lot of the European organizations are leading the way, and we think there is a halo effect, obviously, for the SMB part as well. We also have a team looking at that, and we also have predictions specifically for that segment as well, in terms of the technologies and what's most important going forward. So we'll follow up on that question, lots more. Shall we go? So we've got one wonderful one around the cloud mess.
Lots of cloud wastage as well that Archana was talking about. So perhaps we should go over to Archana.
I would say let's switch over to Archana. Archana, are you there with us? While we switch over, shall I just quickly say, so cloud mess, how can you get your head around this? And what is going on in terms of repatriation, for example, of workloads from the cloud back into the enterprise? I think that's one of the key areas. How do you manage this between multiple clouds? So, Archana, could you help us out here a little bit and maybe talk a little bit more about it in about 30 seconds? That would be superbly wonderful.
Yeah, no, it is such an important question, right? I mean, our research shows that security and network configuration failures are some of the key reasons why cloud is not termed as successful. So getting all of that right is important, and also a big part of that cloud cost optimization. I think it all starts with developing that culture and collaboration, so bringing all of the key stakeholders together, and then think about taking a workload first strategy, right? So that you build your workloads with an abstraction layer. So you have a different control plane and a different data plane, which can then be unified. So you don't have to worry so much about configuring networking every time. So that's one way of solving that problem.
Thank you very much, Shana, for being with us here today and also talking us through it. Now, we realize we are on the hour. So all that remains is maybe a call to action. Let us know what you think. It is to thank you all for being here with us today and listening to the predictions and how we think about 2023 and the next few years. And then obviously a big thank you to everyone on the analyst side as well, the marketing team who's helped us set all this up, and the long hours that have gone into creating the predictions on our side. So with that, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the session. Let us know what you think. Keep in touch and keep the community going.